Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Monday, October the 23rd, 2023. Today I want to talk about Greta Thunberg. The reason I wanted to talk about her is, I saw this news story about her, that apparently she'd been doing stuff which was supportive of the Palestinian cause, and she got some criticism for that. Um, and that reminded me that she is an important person. She is influential and she is a controversial person. And I have not looked at her horoscope before, so I thought now would be a great opportunity to do it. Now, if you're watching this, you may have particular views on Greta. Maybe you object to Greta. Now, my perspective on Greta is that I just want to look at her horoscope. I don't really want to express an opinion about her. Personally, I am a big fan of environmentalism. I'd probably regard myself as something of an eco-fascist. I'm not a big fan of private property rights. I believe that I believe the state should really intervene in terms of what people do and how it relates to the environment and so forth. That's just me. This is an astrology channel. This is not an environmental channel, but broadly speaking, I am sympathetic to Greta Thunberg's goals. Although climate change, I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but if the scientists say so, I'll just take it. Okay, I understand the conspiracy theories. I also understand, that. Greta has been associated and has given talks to the World Economic Forum, and she's perhaps been associated with a globalist elite. And there is a certain amount of hypocrisy there. The globalist elite saying how much they care about the environment, flying off in their private jets. Maybe Greta hasn't done enough to call out that hypocrisy. But I suspect that Greta's heart is in the right place. But in this video, as I said, I just want to look at her horoscope. So don't expect me to condemn her or to try to pick holes in her personality with astrology. If I find holes to pick, I will pick them. But I think the question we're asking with, Greta Thunberg is, how is it that she has become so influential? She's 20 years old. I think she first sort of hit the news when she was 16. What is it? What is it about her horoscope that makes her special? How has she been able to push herself into the limelight? I don't even think that was her plan, but how she managed to do it. So these are the kind of questions I want to use astrology to try to answer. Also, I want to consider timing, and having looked at her chart, it seems that her Mercury is really important. She's got Mercury in Capricorn, and I'll explain why I think it seems to be quite a strong Mercury. Even though I don't have her time of birth, maybe her time of birth is available somewhere out there, but all I can get is just January the 3rd, 2003 in Stockholm. That's all I know about her astrologically. But before I look further at Greta Thunberg's chart, I want to look at the astrology for today, which is Monday, October the 23rd, 2023. Okay, so today's big event, Sun goes into Scorpio. So London time, if you're in London, Sun goes into Scorpio late afternoon at 5:21 p.m. If you're in New York, the Sun will go into Scorpio at 0:21 p.m. So, around lunchtime, the Sun will go into Scorpio. And you can see this in the positions of the planets for today, set for October 23rd, 2023, noon in New York. You can see that the Sun is at 29 degrees 59 minutes Libra, so it's just got 1 minute to go, 1 arc minute. There being 60 arc minutes in a degree, and so at 21 minutes past noon, the Sun shifts and moves into Scorpio. And I think for many of us, we're going to see a big change, because all of a sudden the emphasis really is on Scorpio. Because the moment the Sun goes into Scorpio, that means we've got Mars in Scorpio, we've got Mercury in Scorpio, we've got Sun in Scorpio. Scorpio is a water sign. It's quite emotional. It's quite passionate. It's a fixed sign. So with all that stuff in Scorpio, we're going to find, over the next few weeks that people are going to really hold on to things. They're not going to be in the mood for compromise. They're going to hold on to their positions. That's not good if you've got wars going on. Whether it's sort of Ukraine or what's going on in Gaza, people are going to really find it difficult to contemplate talking to the other side. They're going to find it really difficult to, consider the possibility of, maybe compromising. That's going to be tough. And it's not just in war zones, in sort of politics. Politicians may find it difficult to talk to each other. People are going to be so passionate about their beliefs and about their views. It's all worth defending. It really is worth defending. This is our hill. We're going to die on this hill almost, because this is worth it. That's what Scorpio thinks sometimes. It's so intense, so important, that it's worth risking our life for it. Okay, so that is an extreme view of Scorpio, but it can sometimes be like that. So we've got to watch out for that, and in the context of sort of Ukraine and Gaza, there isn't much scope for forgiveness. Scorpio just remembers everything. And it can hold grudges for years, even decades. So we do have a lot of Scorpio there. Matters are made even more intense by the fact that Venus, there's the planet Venus. Venus is making a sesquiquadrate aspect to Pluto. That's 135 degrees. If you look at the thing in terms of a cake, that's sort of 3. If you've got a cake that's divided into 8 slices, 135 degrees would be 3 slices, 3 out of 3/8 of the circle. That is quite intense. Venus might be in Virgo. Venus in Virgo is quite a flexible sign, but when you make it sesquiquadrate to Pluto, it can be quite rigid. Again, we've got this theme of finding it difficult to compromise, and we again see this theme when we look at the moon. You can see that the moon is in Aquarius, and it's square the planet Uranus. So Uranus is a revolutionary. Uranus likes to cause big events and a lot of drama, but it's in a fixed sign. So people are going to be boiling, perhaps. The emotions are going to get sort of build up, and then they could just sort of explode all of a sudden. So be wary of that when dealing with other people. Don't push them. If you say the wrong thing too many times, it could just suddenly explode. And just consider it also from your perspective, our perspective. There might be things we get really annoyed about, really passionate about, and we're just boiling, and we could suddenly explode, and that's not a very good thing. It's not a good idea. That's something we should try to avoid. Now, there is a rather interesting aspect going on. Now, have a look at Jupiter and Uranus. This is a kind of a technical point here, but you'll see that there is a supposed Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. It's quite wide, but Jupiter and Uranus are together in Taurus. Now, if you look at them closely, you will see that Jupiter and Uranus are exactly 10 degrees apart. Now, that 10 degrees might be special because 10 degrees is a 36 of the circle. Yeah, 36 times 10 is 360. And 36 is 4 times 9. So, and a 4 relates to a square, so that would be, in the jargon, a square on the ninth harmonic. The ninth harmonic is about the attempt to transcend. I haven't read David Hamlin's book on harmonics. He wrote it in the 80s. I haven't read it for a long time. And he talked about the ninth harmonic, and the ninth harmonic, if I remember rightly, is about attempting to transcend, trying to move beyond our everyday life. But it's what happens if you've got a square on the ninth harmonic? That is about the struggle to transcend. So Jupiter-Uranus it's about the struggle to find freedom. Jupiter is expansive. Uranus is kind of quite more explosive. It's a struggle to blast forth and find our freedom and to just move beyond the restraints of the material world and all the other stuff holding us back. And it's going to be a real struggle. So, yeah, that's something to be aware of. How are you going to deal with this struggle? When you look at the world around you, you may feel trapped by it. You may feel that there's insufficient, insufficient spirituality. People are too focused on the material world and money and all of this kind of stuff. And there's a struggle to sort of move beyond that. What you want to do is you want to, in one step, change everything and sort of liberate yourself. So, consider that and consider how best to deal with it. Okay, so what I want to do now is look at the 12 signs. So I have done my forecast for the 12 signs of the zodiac, and here we go. Here are my forecasts for today, which is Monday, October the 23rd, 2023. Aries. The week starts with a lot of social activity, but it's not free-flowing. People are very aware of their roles and positions, and if you overstep anyone's boundaries even a bit, there could be trouble. Also, partners and close friends could be more tense and touchy than usual, so save your impulsiveness for later. Taurus. Today, you're not very flexible. You know what you want, and you know how to achieve it. While it's certainly true that you can make things happen in a big way, you have to be careful that you don't overdo it. There are lots of things that could break, especially in terms of your various relationships. Gemini. Geminis can think too much. And when they start pondering the mysteries of the universe, they can have a moment of horror, when it seems like everything is a waste of time. And at this stage, you either live with absurdity, or you attach yourself to some religion or philosophy or spiritual way of looking at the world. And the inspiration you are looking for is actually closer than you think. Cancer. There continues to be a high level of emotion, though you'll be very good at making sense of it, not rushing down complicated rabbit holes, and instead concentrating on the things that matter. But consider how your behaviour is impacting other people. Without meaning to, you could destabilise the whole situation. Leo. The Sun, your ruler, changes sign from Libra to Scorpio. It's a time of year when Leos become more introspective, perhaps because they're emphasizing home and family. At the same time, you'll become more defensive. But on the plus side, you can ground yourself and set yourself up nicely for the challenges of late 2023 and early 2024. Virgo. You're feeling hemmed in. There are powerful forces to your left and right, and you might feel that you don't have much freedom. But you can certainly deal with the situation. Your powers of self-expression are good, and you can also be very persuasive. An unplanned and perhaps secretive journey can have interesting consequences. Libra. You know what things are worth without having to think about it, and this includes the value of your own labour. As a result, you'll be an effective negotiator, and in most cases, you'll get the price you're looking for. At the same time, you want to enjoy yourself in new and interesting ways. But with the moon aspecting Uranus, you don't want to do anything too weird. Scorpio. There's a lot of activity in your star sign. Mercury and Mars are already in Scorpio, and today they're joined by the Sun. You're holding most of the cards, and you'll be a hard person to beat. But you're not the only person on the planet, and you do need to consider the social dimension. You also need to give away a little to gain a lot. Sagittarius. Jupiter, your ruler, is exactly 10 degrees from the planet Uranus. You're struggling to be inspired by something revolutionary and dramatic. The attraction is there, but also the fear. But it's all about transcending your immediate environment and giving yourself an eagle's eye view. At work, someone is holding something back. Capricorn. You have to work out whether other people are worth the effort. Yes, there are people to deal with, but contacts, once initiated, are unlikely to be trivial. So don't get in contact with someone unless you've got the time and the patience to see things through. In this light, phone calls could last much longer than expected. Aquarius. The emphasis on your career is further intensifying. There's pressure to move forward with your plans, and you may be desperate to make an impact. Fair enough, but there's no hurry. Just ask yourself what you want to achieve by the end of November and start grinding towards your objective. Pisces. People are nervous. They are not sure what the future holds, and they may be inclined to assume the worst, to the point of having irrational fears. But maybe you're the voice of reason. You know what's going on, and you know that things aren't as bad as they seem. Nonetheless, it can be difficult to gain anyone's trust. But I think that's their problem, not yours. I'm now going to move to the I Ching. So, as always, I ask the question, what is Monday going to be like for people watching this video? And I got one hexagram. It didn't move. And this hexagram is hexagram number 27, which is the corners of the mouth. Now, you can see that, you've got a sort of, I know it's not a circle, it's a square, but you can see them in the middle. That's the mouth, and then you've got the corners of the mouth. This hexagram is often connected with nutrition. So one reason or another, perhaps in the most trivial sense, food is going to be important today. You may find yourself preparing food more than you expected. Food is going to be an issue. You're going to be more concerned than usual about what you're eating. Perhaps you're going to be more picky. But that is this hexagram at a most trivial level. Also, the mouth does a lot of talking. So we have to consider what we're saying. So throughout this, throughout the day, just think about what you're saying. Is it the right thing to say? And we should never forget that this hexagram is locked. It's not moving anywhere. So, we might have this concern about food. We might be doing a lot of cooking, or we might be doing a lot of talking, but it might all be for nothing. So, if you find yourself being tempted to spend, or contemplating spending a lot of time preparing food, consider the possibility that it's perhaps a waste of your time. It's a waste of your time in the sense that you don't want to put too much effort into it, because this hexagram is not moving anywhere. It's locked. So you might, put a lot of effort into cooking something, and then in the end, the person you're cooking for or is just not interested or doesn't turn up or something like that. I suppose the golden rule is with preparing food, cooking food, it really, ideally, it shouldn't take you longer to make than it takes you to eat. I know that's a real Philistine thing to say, but I'm a Gemini. I come up with stuff like that. So that's one aspect of the corners of the mouth. But if we want to get into it in a more sort of in-depth way, and move away from the sort of literal meaning of this hexagram. The I Ching, the Wilhelm translation, certainly of the I Ching, suggests that we look carefully when dealing with other people about what they're eating and what nourishes them. So, you might have a question, should you trust someone? Well, ask yourself, what nourishes them? What do they really like doing? What makes them feel good? What makes them feel happy? Perhaps you've noticed that someone spends a lot of time gossiping, spends a lot of time saying bad things about other people. In that case, you could say, that's what nourishes them. That's what they're into. Or they talk about money all the time. So it's money. Do you want to deal with someone who is nourished by money and nothing else, or someone who is nourished by gossip and nothing else? Think about that. What nourishes them, and then you can make a decision about whether you want to get into a closer relationship with them. Some people are nourished by nice things like charitable work, helping people, all that kind of stuff. So you always ask that question. What does nourish them? And so that's a good way to work out how to whether or not to trust someone. And I think it's really good advice, not just when you've got 27 coming up, if you happen to have consulted the I Ching, but in general, when you've got new people to deal with, always ask the question, what nourishes them? Now, an alternative view of 27, articulated by Greg Winkup in his translation of I Ching, is the cheeks, and he says I think he actually calls his hexagram the bulging of the cheeks or something like that. And what this is doing is focusing on digestion. It's like someone who has, I think he puts it like someone who's ate a lot. Ate so much it can't swallow it all down. The cheeks are just full of food, and it's whatever we have ingested, and we now need to digest. So it may be that we just got some news, or we've had a change in our life, or something's happened, and it may be a bit surprising, shocking. It could be good news, could be bad news, but to begin with, we mustn't act on this news because we haven't worked it out. So perhaps what we need to do is digest before we initiate action. We first need to digest it. And so if you get news today, maybe you get a letter, phone call, email, whatever, text message, don't jump to conclusions. It's going to take some time to digest the implications of what you hear. But I should stress that this hexagram is locked. It's not moving anywhere. So that suggests that today we can't expect big things to happen. That's the first point. Second point about this hexagram is if you look at the nuclear hexagram. The nuclear hexagram is when you take the top line off and you take the bottom line off, you see that those 4 lines in the middle are all broken. In other words, the nuclear hexagram is hexagram 2, which is the receptive. And so in general, things are happening from the outside and we are responding to them. This is not a time for really taking the initiative. It's a time for observing, seeing how other people are behaving. If we go out on a limb, take a big initiative, it's unlikely to work, especially with a locked hexagram. Do some observing, do some listening, do some reflecting, and I think that's another good way to deal with this hexagram. Okay, so now I want to look at the horoscope of Greta Thunberg. As I said, I'm not interested in being critical just for the sake of it. I don't have any negativity towards her. One can criticize her approach. I think it's certainly unwise of her to attach herself to causes which are not necessarily relevant to the environment, whether it's Palestine or Ukraine or whatever. I think she says something sort of in favor of positive about Ukraine and negative about Russia. That kind of stuff is not a good idea, I don't think, in my opinion, because you don't want to alienate people. You want as many people as possible to be on your side. It's the environment. That's what you should be focusing on and not getting distracted. That's I suppose my opinion. But okay, so let's look at her horoscope. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a time of birth for her, but the first thing that strikes us about this chart is that she's got a lot of stuff in Capricorn. She was born on a new moon, just after a new moon, and she also has Mercury in Capricorn. So that suggests to me that in her own way, she's pretty grounded. And of course, she is into the earth. She wants, she feels that it's an absolute emergency to protect the Earth. And yeah, she's got 4 planets, three planets plus Chiron in Capricorn. So that sort of makes sense. You know, we often associate Taurus with the environment, but it can be Capricorn just as well. It is an Earth sign, and for her, you know, that's what matters. Yeah, born right after a new moon. In terms of new moons, if I remember rightly, there was an astrologer, Dane Rudyard. He wrote this book called The Lunation Cycle, and the new moon is the beginning of the cycle. And if you want to look at it from a karmic perspective, you might see people born just after a new moon. It's like they're fresh. They're coming into the world from a fairly fresh perspective. They're not too burdened by the past. It's a new, exciting world. That's not the same as saying, old souls, young souls, all that. I'm not into that concept. It's maybe it's all about spirals. We've come from one spiral is over and we're now moving into a new spiral, or at least she is. If, of course, from an incarnation point of view, if you're into reincarnation, you could have hundreds, thousands, whatever, of them. So, she is coming in, she's fairly new and fresh. And I think that probably helps in terms of, her believing that she can just start a protest all by herself. That there is a certain naivety there. You haven't been burdened by the knocks from the past. The past is not weighing down on you, and that's perhaps the advantage for many new moon people. They're coming into it from a fairly sort of fresh perspective. Now, this Mercury, I've talked about this Mercury. It's about the mind. It's about communication. And I know that Greta has I think been diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, which is, I don't know, high functioning autism. Now, I'm in the United States, and by the way, there's no such thing as Asperger's syndrome in the United States. The latest edition of was it the Psychiatric Association, DSM-5? I forget what that's. What does it stand for? I should know, but there's no Asperger's syndrome anymore. DSM-4 had Asperger's syndrome, but that's gone. Now, in another country, you probably can get an Asperger's diagnosis, but not in America, because psychologically that condition doesn't exist anymore. But anyway, you might think that Mercury would be perhaps associated with that, but as far as I can see, that Mercury is well placed. Reason being is because it's in mutual reception with Saturn. So you will see that she has Saturn in Gemini. So Saturn is in Gemini, which is in Mercury's sign. And Mercury is in Capricorn, which is in Saturn's sign. So it may be that, Asperger's syndrome can allow one to be very, very focused. If you see it in a sort of a positive sense, it's about sort of exceptional talent in a particular area. I mean, okay, I know that I know everyone in Sweden speaks English, but yeah, I mean, she communicates pretty well in English. Okay, she's had lots of practice, and I know the Swedes are all good at English, but still, I mean, she does it. She has a particular way of doing it, It's a Mercury in Capricorn way of doing it, and it's a Mercury in Capricorn in mutual reception with Saturn in Gemini. So there's a very Saturnine feel to that. I think, I think with one aspect of Capricorn is that it can be a bit puritanical as a sign. Greta certainly seems to have a puritanical streak, that we should put a lot of our pleasures to one side, particularly, this obsession with traveling. I believe she has stopped her mother from traveling. I think her mother was an opera singer, used to travel a lot, and she's just said, no, you can't do that. I certainly agree with that. I mean, people just travel at the drop of a hat. I don't see the point in traveling anymore. It's like everyone's been everywhere, but you can't go anywhere surprising or exotic anymore, because it's been done. So traveling is not a big deal anymore. And so I think that traveling is a waste of time. I think, wasn't it said that a little traveling narrows the mind? I think there's some case in that. But we all have our prejudices, and then we travel. And what happens when we travel? Our prejudices get confirmed. Greta's right. We should certainly stop flying. But that's my prejudice. There is something puritanical about Greta, and we don't know exactly where her moon is at noon in Stockholm. The moon was at 20 Capricorn, so it would be sextile her Mars. So that gives her a lot of power and ability to get angry. I mean, she's sort of famous for getting angry, and for sort of using quite sort of blunt language. And again, I think that might be moon sextile Mars, because the moon does have a lot to do with communication, but it could be the Mercury, which is in mutual reception to Saturn. Yes, I think it's a very strong Saturn. Now, she also has a Venus-Mars conjunction in Scorpio. Now, Mars in Scorpio is very well placed. Mars rules Scorpio. Pluto does not rule Scorpio. That's a sort of a modernism which I think has been sort of widely discredited. So Mars rules Scorpio, and Mars is in its own sign in Scorpio. That makes her dynamic, and yes, it makes her angry, and she's got a Venus-Mars conjunction in Scorpio. Now, Venus-Mars conjunctions are often connected with sexuality and sex appeal, but they can also, Venus-Mars conjunctions can also be just associated with plain charisma. Clearly, she has a lot of charisma. It's not, you may not pick up on that charisma, but I think that is perhaps the nature of Venus-Mars conjunctions. Venus-Mars conjunctions can have charisma, they can have sex appeal, but it's narrow. It's focused on a particular segment of the population. It's nothing universal. So there is a segment who really pick up on Greta's charisma, who think she's wonderful. A lot of other people can't stand her, and I think that's Venus-Mars in Scorpio. If you don't like me, too bad. That's part of it. This Venus, you can see that Venus in Scorpio sextile her Mercury in Capricorn. So Venus sextile Mercury is very talented. It's a great communicator. It's a powerful communicator. Having said that, Venus is in Scorpio. I mean, Venus doesn't work particularly well in Scorpio. there is a certain difficulty when dealing with other people. There is a sort of a self-protectiveness, particularly, that Venus-Mars conjunction. Venus is making Mars stronger, but potentially Mars is making Venus weaker. That's quite a defended Venus. Venus in Scorpio conjunct Mars. I would have said her boundaries are going to be pretty important to her, and also we can see that she has an exact Venus square Uranus. That's how she deals with other people. I would have said with Venus square Uranus, she could fall out with people very quickly. She could get in touch with them very quickly. Things happen quickly, one way or the other, in terms of how she relates, to other people. That's Venus square Uranus. So probably a difficult person to deal with. And a certain awkwardness there, perhaps. Venus in Scorpio square Uranus in Aquarius. So those are a few thoughts about her horoscope. I wanted to consider, in finishing, when it all started. So she had this school strike. I think she was in 9th grade, and at the end of August 2018, she started this strike. So rather than going into school, she refused to go to school, and she went to, I believe, to the Swedish Houses of Parliament. And so the question is, how, can we see anything? Is this a big deal for Greta? When this happened, what was going on? Now, the school strike, I don't know. It was August the 20th, 2018. I don't know when Swedish schools start. I Googled it. Some said 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. I don't know. I just gone for 8:30 in the morning for when the school strike started. This is when, I may not have got the time right. It may have been completely different, but the planets are going to stay the same. So I don't want to get too focused on the ascendant and the midheaven in this chart, because there's a possibility I've got the time wrong. But the beginning of her school strike, you can see two things come to mind. Firstly, the moon is in Sagittarius for a school strike, for Greta turning up outside the Swedish Parliament. Moon in Sagittarius, that's great for communicating a message, for being quite clear, for being very tactless, not caring who you offend, being very straightforward. And it's trine the sun. And sun is fairly close to Regulus, the royal star, meeting important people. Important people notice what you're doing. And the moon, whenever you're starting something, if a moon and a sun and a moon are in trine aspect, that is good, and they're in far signs, and the moon is applying to a trine of the sun. So I think that was a very good. It's a very good aspect to start your big campaign off on. At the same time, let's look at Mars. Mars is in Capricorn. So Mars is a planet of assertion, aggression. If you want to launch a campaign, having Mars in Capricorn, the sign of its exaltation, that's a good thing to do. But Mars is exalted it's exalted in Capricorn. It's the 28th degree of Capricorn, I believe, is its degree of maximum exaltation. So Mars is actually quite close to the 28th degree, because it's in the 29th degree of Capricorn, at 28:58 Capricorn. So it's a strong Mars, and so starting this process with Mars in Capricorn and Moon, Sun trine Moon, certainly a good thing to do. Now, as far as how these planets were directly affecting her, now remember I said that her Mercury was really important. So you can see that she has her Mercury at 28:25 Capricorn, and Mars was at around 28:58 Capricorn. So she had Mars exactly conjunct her Mercury when all this was happening. So I would have said that this was incredibly useful, having Mars conjunct her Mercury. Another thing to point out is, okay, it's not specifically about the day, but you can see that Saturn was retrograde at 2:47 Capricorn. Okay, it went direct sort of later in the year, and so she had Saturn in the same sign as her Sun, Moon, and Mercury. So she had a Saturn transit of her Sun and Moon over the next couple of years. Next year she would have had Saturn transiting Saturn on her Sun, on her Moon, and on her Mercury. Now, Saturn transits have a bad reputation, but this is a reminder that when you have that transit with Saturn in its own sign, very often it needn't be so bad. So, that chart just reminds us that Saturn was in Capricorn, particularly if you're doing something Saturnine. And, it is very Saturnine to tell people not to fly, to tell people not to be hypocrites, to tell people that they've got to give up all their pleasures for the sake of the environment. That's pure Saturn, and Saturn likes that kind of stuff. That's fine as far as Saturn is concerned. So that's the day. That's the day she started the school strike. We can also see the school strike from the perspective of solar arc directions, like when we move everything forward 1 degree, 1 degree for every year. So she was 16 and a half, I think. So her 16th birthday would have been, or she less than that. Her 16th birthday would have been, she was younger than that. So her 16th birthday would have been January 2019. So she would have been 15, I think, when this happened. So if you look at her solar arc directions, remember, moving everything 1 degree a year. So look at her sun. So she was born of her sun. Okay, I don't know her time of birth, but approximately 12 degrees 30 minutes Capricorn. Her sun had moved forward by solar arc to 28.5 Capricorn, which is the degree of her Mercury. So her solar arc sun had moved right onto her Mercury. And as I've already suggested, Mercury is strongly placed, and we've already seen in her the transit chart for this when she started the school strike that Mars was on her Mercury. Then we had solar arc sun was on her Mercury, so Mars was kind of acting as a trigger. Then there's also the question is, what about Greta's karma? Was this the right thing for Greta to be doing? Now, Greta, in her horoscope, she has North Node and Saturn in the same sign, in Gemini. North Node actually works quite well in Gemini. Saturn works well in Gemini, particularly in a daytime chart. So North Node is about where we're supposed to be going to. So if you've got Saturn in the same sign as the North Node, you should, discipline, limitation, that sort of puritanical streak of hers. It's all in keeping with what she should be doing. But if you look at North Node and Saturn, you can see that they're approximately 16 degrees apart, in the same way that her Sun and Mercury were 16 degrees apart. We could tell that around her 16th birthday, in this case it was just before her 16th birthday, the school strike started, and by solar arc direction, her North Node has moved to 24 degrees, has moved to 24 degrees Gemini. In other words, it's clicked 16 degrees North Node, where she has clicked onto her Saturn. And that suggests to me that when she started the school strike, it was her thing to do. Whatever you think of Greta, I know a lot of people listening to this don't like Greta. But you have to look at things from her perspective, and you have to look at things from the universe's perspective. She was put on the planet for a particular purpose, I suppose, as we all are. And she's doing the right thing. Like it or not. I suppose one final thing before I go is I should consider what's happening to her right now. There's her chart. So what about right now? Anything interesting happening? Okay, let's just see, because there were a couple of things I think that are perhaps worth looking at. Pluto is about to transit her Mercury. Now, I've already said that her Mercury is really important. I think this Pluto transit of her Mercury is going to matter. Now, I don't know precisely when this transit's going to happen, but don't have her time of birth, but it's starting. She's starting to feel it next couple of months. So I don't know what Greta's up to, except for supporting the Palestinians in Gaza. But Pluto on her Mercury may suggest that something's going to happen that's going to could really shock her. Remember, she has a fixed view of the world, a pretty fixed view of the world. So if Pluto is going to hit her Mercury, Mercury is the way she thinks, the way she perceives, and all this kind of stuff. So Pluto is going to hit her Mercury, and suddenly she's going to see things the way it is, and it's going to be a shock to her. And it could actually be quite devastating. Perhaps. We don't know. We don't know the whole story. We don't have a time of birth. And the concept of shock is given further ammunition. We've got a further idea of this, because look at Uranus. Uranus is at 2155 Taurus, and her Mars is at 21.9 Scorpio. Again, it's not actually there because I don't have the time of birth, but she's got Mars opposition. She's got Uranus opposition her Mars. Again, that is a shock. Something happens which she hasn't planned for. In the same way that Pluto conjunct Mercury is about events sort of happening that she hasn't really planned for. And she might actually find it quite difficult to deal with it. And I think that's coming up. Maybe, for example, the criticism she got for what she said and the details of the photograph she had with those sort of pro-Palestinian activists. I don't want to go into deep specifics. You can look it up. That might have been a shock to her, but there may be other shocks coming up. And so I think in the short term, looking at those two transits, flexibility is going to be very important for Greta. Greta's got to be able to deal with a changing world and be able to adapt to it, and that could be quite difficult. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about Greta Thunberg. I know a lot of you don't like her or don't, find her just sort of grating and patronizing and telling us what to do and so forth. But I would argue that she's doing the right thing in terms of herself, in terms of her own destiny. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say about her. And thank you for listening. And I will talk to you again tomorrow.